Good morning. You can keep eating. Oh, that's good. Let's hear a good morning. Good morning. Wonderful. Glad to have you all here this morning. I know it's early on a Friday in June. You'd probably rather be somewhere else. I came in from Disney World yesterday, so I'm actually much happier to be here than I was there. So no lines this morning for breakfast, so that's good. Before we get started, let me do a little safety briefing. So there's no planned fire drill for this morning. So if you hear a fire drill, it is real. What we are supposed to do, let me make sure I get this right, is we should go out the room to the back, exit to the left down the stairs. Muster point is going to be in the parking lot. So I'm David Skinner. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for KCA. We're the underwriter for the event, and I'm pleased to welcome you all here today. This is our second breakfast that we are televising. So we've got a few hundred people online that are going to be dialing in virtually. I guess they get to watch this in their pajamas and things instead of having to dress up like everybody else. But we want to welcome all of them to the event this morning. I can't tell if this is working all the time or not. It's a huge microphone. Anyway, a little bit about KCA. So we're a management consulting firm. We work in oil and gas, as you can imagine, healthcare and technology. We work with clients on kind of key business decisions and also helping them come up with game-changing strategies, which I think there's probably a need for a little bit of that these days. Next, I would like to put the next slide up. See it? But want to announce that our next event, there it is, I think, is going to be September the 16th, and the title of that is New Technology for Old Business. And as you can see, we've got our panel of speakers already signed up for that. And if you sign up today, and today only, you can get your seat for $75. So hurry and go out and get your seat for that. Okay. Next slide, please. There we go. So back in, I guess it was probably about January of this year, I was reading all the headlines about the layoffs and the downturn in the industry, and just show of hands, how many of you have been through at least 2 downturns now? Okay, how about 3? How about 4? Okay, those of us that still have their hands up, we've got the battle scars to show it. I've been through 5 of these, and it seems like everyone is a little different, but this one really did start to feel quite different. The amount of talent that we kind of saw walking out the door, either voluntarily or involuntarily, I think it's been quite amazing. And as we all know, even though things go down, they do come back up. And so one of the concerns that I was seeing was, what are we going to do with this sort of talent deficit? How are we going to fill that gap? And I happened to be talking to a friend of mine, Katie Maynard, who's out here, and I'm going to bring her up on stage in just a minute, and said, this really does seem to be different than other downturns that we've experienced. What are you hearing? And both of us kept hearing from friends that had been in the industry for quite a while and still had, I would say, many good years left to participate in the industry, but they were really just kind of tired of it and were going to go do other things, whether they were going to take early retirement. and go fishing, or actually some of them really are looking at completely different industries to move on to. So he said, what can we do about this? And the thought came up that maybe we should do a study, but not just kind of a data gathering study, but one that really looks at what are potential actions or strategies that the industry can take to hopefully rectify the situation that we kind of see that we're in. So we launched Energy 2021, which was first phase of the study. We launched it at the beginning of OTC. We had a fantastic response to it. By the way, that study or the survey is still open until June 17th. We'll, I think, put some information up where you can go log in if you'd like to participate in that if you have not. But I'm going to bring Katie up on stage to give you just a few little teasers of the information that we've kind of already gathered so far. And so Katie, if you'll come on up. While she's coming up, I'll tell you a little bit about Katie. So Katie's the CEO and founder of Pink Petro, which is a global community of energy professionals providing digital learning, formal and informal networking, mentoring, and development to bring about the next generation of women in the industry. Katie's worked for Shell and BP in fairly senior roles, and Katie shares definitely the passion that I do to see this industry not just survive, but really thrive. So with that, Katie, if you'll come on up and talk a little bit about what we've seen so far.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone. It's exciting to be here to talk about the one thing I love, my industry, and that's the energy industry. So, we truly are living in unprecedented times. I think we've heard this a lot. To give some perspective about why I think we did this is I participated in January by watching the World Economic Forum. How many of you are aware of the Davos event that happens every year? Great, wonderful place to get insight. And the one thing that struck me was the fact that we were talking about, on a broader scale, what they're calling the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And the Fourth Industrial Revolution is what's changing everything. Our industry, healthcare, banking, finance, the whole game is changing. So the world of work is changing. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We've got a lot of challenge ahead of us. But I believe the energy industry can emerge in a different era. You all probably are aware of the Renaissance back in the early days in Italy, where lots of flourishment of art, flourishment of ideas. The opportunity is now for us to be looking at that, and I'm really excited about leveraging this study to understand what is the future, because each and every one of us in this room underpins society. We do things that are very important, and those things need to continue. So the chairman said there's never been a time of greater promise or greater peril, and I agree with that. We're being forced to adapt to new things, new ways of working, what I call the post-normal. So what is normal today, right? It's very hard today to assess risks, to predict trends, and it's even hard to understand who to listen to, right? Don't know where to get the source of information. So what they talked about at the forum are these kind of three areas, and I want to point out a few. The impact being felt already around people and talent are around the middle class in emerging markets, crowdsourcing, the sharing economy, which is all the stuff you see today around social, changing the nature of work, the flexibility of work, how we learn. But obviously, we're living this period, and you see this right here, where new energy supplies and technologies have emerged. So we're looking at that in the study. We're asking questions of leaders, we're asking questions of workers, and we're hoping to ask questions of students. We want to know what everyone thinks about energy and what that future looks like. So lower for longer. We keep hearing this, right? I think the thing that's interesting about this study is, and we're going to go through a little bit of that data, is how long folks think this is going to last, where people's sentiments are today. And I want to encourage all of you, if you haven't participated in this study yet, to please share the study address. We want to get everyone's input. We felt like if 2,500 of the world's leaders could come together to talk about the future of work, why couldn't the rest of the population do that? We should use the social tools to get the word out and get our opinions heard as well. So, we talked a little bit about this, but these are some of the issues that we're facing. So I heard about the great crew change 10 years ago. That's happening. I'm starting to see all the role models that I worked for leaving, golfing, having lots of fun. That's great. I hope I get to join them one day. But we've got a lack of critical knowledge. There's a lot of concern about the loss of talent, and obviously the skills gap, the volatility, and all the cost reductions that are going on in our businesses today. So our study tries to address some of those concerns. So the survey says, let me give you some data. So most of the respondents are from upstream and professional services. You'll see the kind of breakout here. We're really hoping to get more university students and the next generation involved. So if you have folks in your family or you know folks who are studying, we'd like to get their perspective. I talk to universities all the time, and unfortunately we're seeing petroleum students leave the industry. So it would be great to get some more perspective there, but this is where we're standing today. Where do they live? 82% of the folks are here in the States, 12% abroad in Europe, and we've got a speckling kind of all over between Oceania, Latin America, and the East. We'd love to see more representation here. So again, please share. The overwhelming majority have been in the industry more than 5 years. Surprise, surprise there. We're really hoping, like I said, to diversify this mix of respondents. Many, though, of the respondents have been in their current position less than 5 years. I think that speaks to how our work is changing. The fact that jobs are no longer jobs, there are roles. So I don't have a job, I have 20 roles, and in this environment, many of you have 40. So this is speaking to that, I believe. Most respondents are first generation. Some are second or third generation energy. It was really neat to see some of the people in the room and earlier talking about the fact they've been in the business for a while. 50% of others know folks who've left. This is the statistic that's very alarming to me. And there are 45% of the people out there considering leaving the industry. This is a problem. I have a background in health and safety, and I'm very concerned about the competency gap that we have ahead of us, and we need to make sure that that competency gap doesn't create more regulation, more costs, and more problems for the industry. So this is a statistic that really caught my attention. 60% of the respondents hold a manager or higher role in the organization. We did have some individual contributors respond, so we got about 44% that are individual contributors in the organization. We'd like to see a better representative mix here. 64% of the folks have obviously reported workforce reductions, with 32% expecting additional headcount cuts. So we're still seeing more reduction. I think it'll be interesting to see where we're going to be later this year, though. So we're going to do a real quick stand-up. So everybody stand up. I know you hate these kinds of things, but stand up. And if you're online, stand up. All right, so Family Feud. I'm going to say at what price we think the market has recovered, and if you believe that that's the case, keep standing. $40. Nobody. $50. $60. $70. $80. 100? Got any hundreds? Okay, so the survey says 60 to 70. Right now, 60 to 70 is where our respondents have said that we've stabilized and we've recovered. I don't know where we're at right now. Let's hope it's on the way up. But I think that that's an interesting statistic to pull out of the study as well. So he talked a little bit about the journey. We just started this journey last month. We started collecting great data, several hundred responses. We'd like to get more. So please share this with your colleagues and take it yourself. The next step is to have some face-to-face conversations and get a little deeper. And there's a way for you to do that by putting your information in the survey. And then we're going to synthesize that information and later this fall prepare something where we start talking about strategies. So the survey is extended through the 17th of next week. If you go to energy2021.com, you should be able to do that. And we really appreciate all of your valuable ideas. It's going to take everybody in this room and everybody online and everyone across the world to make what energy is going to be in the future. And I'm pretty excited about it. Thanks.
Okay. Hopefully that wasn't too depressing. But unfortunately, the state of where we're at, I think. So next, for something maybe a little more uplifting, I'd like to invite Joe Burke up to the stage. So as many of you know that have been to these breakfasts before, we have kind of two big charitable contributions that we do. One is for junior achievement, which is what Joe's going to talk about, and the other is veterans, which I'll introduce in a minute. But Joe, if you'll come on up.
Good morning. It's kind of interesting. We have the chance to go out and speak with a number of different industries, and your skills gap is mirrored in healthcare, it's mirrored in construction trades, in a variety of industries. And really, if you look at how do you close that skills gap, part of the solution is you really need to start to close the education gap. Did some basic sort of cursory research into the state of Texas. I looked at this year the number of seniors, and I thought, I wonder how many of them were ninth graders 4 years ago. And I looked, and there was a 20% drop in the number of students that were 12th graders from ninth grade in the state of Texas. 1 of 5 doesn't even make it to the 12th grade. So how do we keep those kids motivated? We really need to make sure that we are looking at ways to keep relevance in education, and that is what Junior Achievement does. If you're not familiar, and I know many in the room are, many of the companies are supportive of what JA does. We are a nonprofit organization, teach kids K through 12 programs around entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and work readiness, and we do that to 300,000 students annually in Houston, 12,000 volunteers, making a difference in kids' lives. And one of the things I'm really proud of is that we do a lot of research and evaluations to ensure the efficacy of our programs. And it's interesting because when I came last time, there was a lot of data. RTU provided a lot of data at each of these. And so I thought we would provide a little data for the group to digest. So we have some results from a recent survey that was done on our Finance Park program. And one of the things you have to look at is how do you affect students that are at risk of dropping out? There's really kind of 3 factors. There was a book called The Silent Epidemic that looked at kids that dropped out, and there were 3 things. 1, there's a lack of relevancy. 2, they don't understand that they have the control themselves, that they can make the difference. And 3, they don't believe that education is going to make a difference for them. So the Finance Park program, we know that they are gaining the content that's being taught in this program. Right? So statistically significant gains in content knowledge, and more importantly, effect size. And for those of you that aren't statisticians, like I am not, basically what that means is how big is that gain and how meaningful is that gain. And in education, a 0.3 is considered an effect, 0.5 is robust, and 0.80 is considered sort of metaphysical certitude that you're having that impact. And so an effect size of 0.75 is very strong, and we're very pleased with those results. But I think more importantly, they're the attitudinal changes that we see in the kids that participate in our program that are so meaningful. 25% of students had a favorable change in their locus of control. In other words, they have that realization that if it's going to be me that makes that difference. So many kids think that life happens to them, and in reality, we all know it's the choices you make that get you where you need to be, and I think the earlier you understand that, the more likely you are to have success in life. 92% of the volunteers felt that the program really makes a connection between the workplace and school, and that's so critical for students who are at risk of dropping out. And lastly, 28% of students had increases in self-efficacy, that belief that they can, in fact, accomplish something. I think those are huge gains. That's really moving the needle. And it's really difficult to do in education. To move the needle in education is not an easy thing to do. So we're very pleased with these results. If you'd like to learn more, come see me at table 3. If you'd like to make a difference in the life of a child, come see me at table 3 after the breakfast. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak. Thank you, David.
And just so you know, I've been on the Board of Junior Achievement for the last 10 years. And when I first started, we were at, I think, like 180,000 students, something like that. This last year, we did over 323,000. So quite a big impact. And our volunteers have grown dramatically. I think 5,000 or 6,000 when I joined, and we're over 12,000 today. So again, thank you. Thank you, Joe. As I said, the other group that we really try and promote are our veterans, the ones especially that are returning from duty and looking to enter the workplace. If I could ask the veterans in the audience, the ones that are returning, if they'd stand, so you can recognize where they're at. Thank you very much. So these men and women are actually looking to enter our industry. If you've got opportunities, I would recommend talking to them afterwards. We will put their resumes up online. Okay, without further ado, and just so if you're wondering, we did start breakfast early this morning so we could go through the survey and things like that. We should be on track now. And next up is Russ Capper. So Russ has been our moderator from day one with the breakfast. Russ has done I think a great job. We decided we'd keep him for a couple more. So yeah, Russ has kind of an interesting and illustrious career. But one of the probably more interesting things is that Russ has both the Business Maker Show and the Energy Maker Show, where he's interviewed over 1,500 influential leaders and executives over 10 years? 10 years. Yeah, it's been a long time. So without further ado, Russ.
Thanks, great to be here. A couple of things about this media business that I'm in. I love it. I love to champion the causes. That's why I do it. I'm not really a media guy. When I first started, I was on the radio, and people would introduce me, and they would say, "Oh yeah, you're the radio guy that does a business show." And I'm going, "Nope, I'm a business guy that does a radio show." I always like to clear that up. I've had the opportunity, as David said, to interview quite a few real cool Make It Happen people. Coming up this week, next Wednesday on the Business Maker Show, my guest is going to be Barbara Denson, who some of you have run into in the audience. Where are you, Barbara? She's here. She's the person that has a book that she just hit the market, I think, like yesterday. She's holding it up. You know, there have been many children's books written about oil and gas. This is the first one that is not disparaging. It's really pretty cool. And Barbara, like I, really feel like the industry needs to champion the cause so much more. At our dinner a couple of nights ago, we discussed this. I think that the industry itself ought to defend itself much more than they do these days. I know you can kind of feel like, wow, we never win those debates. But I tell you, you really don't win if you don't show up. So I'm always championing the defense. But before we get going, I want to know a little bit more about the audience. This is the sixth Houston Energy Breakfast. How many of you are here for the first time? Whoa, lots of rookies. You don't know about the hazing that takes place after the breakfast. How many of you been here more than 2? Okay, has anybody in here been here more, has anybody been 6? I have. David and Kevin have, Diana has. There's a few, cool. All right, a little bit more. How many of you, is anybody graduates of the University of Houston? Okay, what about Rice? Okay, that's cool. Texas A&M? Whoop! University of Texas? Trump University? That's right, they don't have any graduates. They just have plaintiffs. I forgot about that. I really am delighted to be here. It's a cool panel, as always, and it's time to really get going forward. All I got to do is get my iPad to go forward. But we wouldn't be here for sure if we didn't have these cool sponsors that we have. You know, these things don't just happen for the fact that we get to show up and pay a few bucks for breakfast. So there are cool, more than ever, I think, sponsors. Keep joining on. We have Resources 2 Energy. If you're here, give us a shout out where you are. Right here, cool. We have PKF Texas, CPAs and professional advisors. They also champion the cause of oil and gas. They're key sponsors, title sponsors of the Energy Maker Show. Seabridge Media. It's the guys in the back. Wipro, back over here. Cool. Pink Petro. We know where they are. Good job. Although, Katie, the minute you mentioned post-normal, I thought, man, I've always been living in post-normal. I don't know what the deal is. We have the University of Colorado Denver Business School GEM program. We're even up here, tool. Computer Business Solutions, Inc., Seasons 52, Junior Achievement, and of course, the Energy Maker Show. Okay, so now it's time to introduce our cool panel from my left to right, which I don't think that's right. I think it's from your left to right. Or as W would say, my right hand doesn't know what my left hand is doing. I always loved it when he did that. Okay, first, R.T. Dukes, the research director of Wood Mackenzie. He spent 6 years with Wood Mackenzie in various research and consulting roles. Currently, he manages the company's detailed analysis of major upstream developments through the North American Key Service Play. And this is his 5th Houston Energy Breakfast. Is that right? Cool. Next, Jim Marchiori, the executive director of the Global Energy Management at the University of Colorado and Denver Business School. Jim is the executive director of GEM, and he has over a 30-year career, has been a champion for the use of technology and innovation in workforce development for the oil and gas industry. To his left, Maria Boras, the Chief Commercial Officer with GE Oil and Gas based in Houston, Texas. Maria manages a team of over 4,000 employees globally in sales, commercial, key accounts, and marketing organizations. She was appointed to her position in January of 2015 when she joined GE as a company officer. Next to me, David Reed, the Chief Marketing Officer with National Oil Well, that's Varco. In OV, David Reed is the Chief Marketing Officer. He is in charge of developing the market and strategic engine of NOV across regional operations and business segments in order to offer their customers a most valued position in their relative markets. He's been with Varco since 1992. Okay, so today's presentations and audio can be found at the Houston Energy Breakfast website. That's www.houstonenergybreakfast.com. and should be available by early next week. So we're going to end with a Q&A session, and we always really try to stay disciplined, panel members, on a 12-minute presentation so we have enough time afterwards for question and answers. You should have some cards on your desk, on your table that you need to fill out if you have a question, and we'll pick them up at the end. The computer business solutions people are the people that supplied the actual cards to do this. After the Q&A session, as we've done through all of these, we're going to give away a $200 gift card that was generously donated by Seasons 52. You must be present to win, so keep that in mind. The Seasons 52 is located at I-10 at Westheimer. There's also one about 100 yards that way, but I don't think it's part of the program, is it? It is. So you could go to that one too. Cool. That's good. Good to know. Okay, so without further ado, let's bring up R.T. Dukes.
I think it's my fifth time, Russ. What I do know is it's been enough for me to figure out. You ask how many people are here for the first time, because that allows you to tell the same jokes over and over again if the majority raises their hand. But that's a speaker's secret, I think. As Russ mentioned, I work for Wood Mackenzie. We're a global firm, leading provider of commercial intelligence in the energy industry. In more simple terms, that means we have about 600 analysts that cover every oil field in the world and just about every mine in the world. And we have an opinion on just about every market in the world. So we like to say we have opinions. Some people say we're opinionated. I'll let you guys make the judgment, but happy to share some of my perspective. Contact information's here. As always, I take compliments. That's one of those same jokes that I tell every time, but also complaints and questions. So feel free to contact me afterwards if you're not able to ask a question during the Q&A. We're independent, so we're not invested in any of these assets that we cover. So it means we can be like a pinball at times, because we work for people on both sides of the equation that differ with our views. And that's a little bit about what I'm going to talk, or alluding to what I'm going to talk about today. There's a quote: successful investing is about having everyone agree with you later. And that's a lot about what we do as well. And so, first slide here, if I can get it to change. This is a good example with Muhammad Ali's passing. You know, someone who was really a villain for much of our lives, really a heroine today, you know, in his death. And so I have this here for other reasons, though. It's just an analogy that we like, simple analogies. And so much of my job is boiling things down into simple terms, when in reality it's not always as simple as good versus evil, or OPEC versus non-OPEC, or OPEC versus the U.S., like many of you would hear on a regular basis. So a few things I'll touch on today are drilled but uncompleted wells oversupplying the world, break-evens that are going to go lower forever, or the other side that'll say they're going to reinflate as soon as possible, M&A is dead, or that there's going to be mass consolidation, or that the U.S. ramp-up in supply will be immediate, or that it's dead. Like I said, bankruptcies will end the industry. And really this slide, I just wanted to use source boxingjunkies.com for the first time in my career. I thought you guys would get a kick out of that. I'll figure out which direction to point this thing at some point. DUCs, as you've likely heard in the headlines, drilled but uncompleted wells. What are those really? There is a normal lag from the time you drill a well till you complete it. There is an abnormal lag that we've seen over the past couple of years that really is companies doing one of two things. It's capital preservation, or it's making a commodity price play. So they either thinking prices will be higher in the future, I'm better off producing these barrels in the future, or, as you can see here, about 60 to 70% of my well cost is in that completion. And so I can save a lot more money by not completing wells than I can by slowing down drilling. So initially, you'd see people hold rigs, delay completions. What I would say, though, is the two things that you hear, that they'll swamp the market and that some people say they don't exist, probably neither one of those is exactly true. The reality is there is some supply that's fairly significant. If you believe the high estimates for the drilled but uncompleted wells, they're about 1/4's worth of completions at the peak in 2014. So even if you could immediately ramp up and bring all those wells back on, we're talking about an influence that's maybe in the couple 100,000 barrels per day. In reality, and I'll speak to this in a moment, some of the things Katie alluded to, we have a lot of people missing, a lot of capacity that's been lost in the industry. And to spread that out over 2, 3, I'd argue maybe 2 years, and then it's not a very big impact. And then the people that think they don't exist, they do exist. We have operators that are working them off. We see it in the numbers. We see more completions than we see drilling spuds on a regular basis. And so they are influencing the the market. And then break-evens. This curve, I think I've showed various references to this curve through time. During these breakfasts, if you've attended on a regular basis, this curve shifts and it changes with gas price outlook and oil price outlook. And we've seen a lot of deflation in the service sector. You know, a couple things that you'll hear are that break-evens will go lower forever. The reality is, U.S. is different from an unconventional standpoint in that if you think about a mega project offshore, you might drill 10 to 12 wells. You think about an unconventional play onshore, individual operators might drill thousands of wells. So just the instances for learning are so vast that you will learn. Things will get better. On the service side, though, you know, I do know this, is that service pricing is almost, well, it's about 99% correlated with commodity prices. So service pricing will go up. This thing won't go down into perpetuity for sure. And the one thing I know also is that we're very efficient and very innovative in downturns. We're pretty good at doing basically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it in the good times. When we know we can make money, we don't innovate near as much as maybe we should. And so this curve will move, but maybe not as much as people think it will. Productivity won't grow forever. And then the other thing, so as mentioning, I work for people on both sides. 2 years ago, spending time in Europe and Asia, and people saying, oh, the marginal barrels in the U.S. The U.S. is just going to shut down. We won't have drilling in the U.S. Those companies will go bankrupt. The things that were said, we know, everybody knows, like it was common knowledge that the U.S. was the marginal barrel, and us kind of sitting back and saying, wait, you do realize costs are dropping very quickly. We have new plays emerging that are low cost, and we have cores of almost all these plays that are very big and low cost and very productive. And so 2 ways that we've had to tell that story there. And then M&A history. The 2 things we hear here is M&A's dead, and the other that it's expensive. You know, and it kind of depends on what zip code you're in. Oil and gas isn't much different than real estate. It's location, location, location. And so if you're looking at the assets that aren't as sexy today, it's conventional assets, it's maybe gas assets. You see some deals that trade at reasonable metrics. And then you look out to the Permian, and that was the reason I showed the Permian on that last slide to show you it's fairly well distributed along that break-even curve, but it seems to be the course of the day, and that's what people really want. And so a bolt-on acquisition there might rival prices you saw at the peak as well for different reasons, maybe more potential today than we thought 2 or 3 years ago. And what I'd really highlight on this curve is what that average implied price is. So we have a view of all these assets when these deals trade hands, and we calculate, okay, at what price would it take to do the deal at the amount or the consideration that was paid with our base assumptions for those assets. And as you can see, it kind of trended up, you know, almost 10 years ago now, close to $80 per barrel real, and it's kind of sat there. And even though we've had less volume, we've had a few deals on the lower end of this, it's really still close to around $70 per barrel. And so what we've contended all along is you see a stalemate in these periods of really low prices. There weren't any deals that really happened at the end of January and in February, not many in March, not many in April. And then we're seeing an uptick in May now. And what happens as prices rise, you get people that have gone 2 years through a downturn and they say, you know what, we'll take a little bit lower price for this. Maybe it's not worth what we thought it was worth internally. And then you also get buyers that'll be more aggressive with their price assumptions as well. And if it's a play you've been drilling in, maybe you've learned a little more, maybe you've proved a little bit more about the asset. And then last slide, this is really building off of what Katie said, is, and I would characterize this as lead times. And this slide alone could be a 20-minute presentation. It's too busy, and it's probably really a consulting slide. You know, as what we would joke is our consultants build these really busy slides that are overcomplicated. And really all it's meant is to kind of lay out that even in a smooth recovery, in an ideal situation, it probably still takes 2 years. And I think probably 2 years is minimum before we're at kind of a normal industry level of activity and run rate. And I'm not saying you couldn't see a reaction, a big reaction, in a shorter time period. I'm just saying if you think the industry is robust, and we have an oil price in which the industry is robust, it could take 2 years before we're back to running at normal levels. And a lot of that will be highlighted by the surveys that are going on now. And you know, even within your companies, as we talk to our clients, and there's several big companies, even in Houston, contemplating 10 and 20% further staff cuts. We might be past the bottom in the commodity price cycle, but we might not be past the bottom in terms of layoffs. And so potentially more to come. And so you add a hiccup in any one of these line items. So let's just say we get weakness in oil price in the first quarter of next year. Let's just say in the ideal world it's 50 or higher going forward, and then it's 45 in the first quarter. What does that do to the mindset for people that make decisions about capital budgets? Risk aversion has paid so far in the last 18 months or 2 years. And so I wouldn't bet on people being too aggressive, but then again, I would say history has taught us U.S. independents are always fairly aggressive, but maybe not aggressive as we would like in this upturn, so the U.S. won't dominate. I'll end with that, but I'll leave you with this in terms of saying things are simple, but sometimes market dynamics are a lot more complicated. I was really surprised to see this recently, statistic-wise. Many of you probably drink coffee. Did you know that we almost have as many mattress stores in the U.S. as we have Starbucks? You thought about that? How often do you buy a mattress? How often do you buy coffee? It's very different. And so even though we like things to be simple, something like sleep and buying a bed is very simple, sometimes market dynamics can be much more complicated than what meets the eye.
Well, you never can tell what you're going to learn here. I didn't know that, man. It's great. That was great. The mattress stores. Okay. Up next, from the University of Colorado at Denver, Jim Marchiri. Let's hear it for Jim.
Thanks, Russ, and thanks, everybody, for coming. As Russ said, my name's Jim Marchiori. I lead the Global Energy Management Program at the University of Colorado Denver Business School. And just a little bit quickly about Jem and about myself, if this moves. There we go. Jem is a master's of science degree focused on business. So think of it as an energy MBA. We go across all the different aspects of the energy industry. Get this down a little bit better. And we have, a multiple dimension mission that we do. The core of our business is the master's degree program. What makes this really interesting, I think, is the hybrid delivery model. So what that means is that our students come into the business school for 4 days every quarter and do 40 hours of classroom time over a weekend, and then the rest of the quarter is all online. So literally we have students all over the world, mid-career type people, average age is 34, and really heading toward different leadership roles in the energy industry. All aspects of the energy industry. So that becomes a little bit relevant later on, and I'll come back to some of that, because when we start talking about workforce issues, it reflects with us quite a bit. My own personal background is really essentially all workforce related. I have about 35 years in energy. Most of that is oil and gas. Most of that is gas. And all of it has been around human performance and human development. So I started off running training departments and then moved from there into strategy, execution, and other aspects of the business around the world. So today I'm going to go really quickly. I have a bunch of slides. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you, but we're going to talk about how we come out of this downturn, both as companies and as individuals. And what do we need to do? Because as a couple of the people have already talked about this morning, Katie and RT, this one is a little bit different from other ones, and there's a reason for it. So, as you all know, and as Katie's survey also points out, there's been some effects of this. There always are. I mean, this is, depending how you measure it, my 7th or 5th, depending on what you count as a downturn, and you always have impacts on your workforce, you have impacts on your people, you have impacts on your strategy and your ability to execute strategy. So as we come out of this thing, we need to think about how that works. Real quickly, you've all probably seen something like this. This is just oil and gas extraction employees. This is layoffs over the last 2 years. So you see we've got about 10%, 20% reduction. There's more to that in different parts of the industry. So you see oil services, for instance, much harder hit. What's interesting about this, and this comes really from a Mercer analysis, is that the difference between this and prior downturns, after the 80s, everybody said we're not going to do this same thing again. And sure enough, we proceeded to just go ahead and do the same thing again, which is not really surprising because we always do the same thing again. It's caused a lot of atrophy in our talent infrastructure. Our hiring has dropped off essentially to zero. The investment in developing talent has dropped off almost to zero. And the external organizations that provide that development, as well as our internal organizations, have dropped way off too. This is a really interesting slide. This one shows petroleum engineering enrollments around the country, and you can see here in the 80s, this is the downturn after the 80s, and then up, and then starting to trend down again. This is reflected through all different job types and job classifications. Petroleum engineering probably the most extreme because it's the most specialized. But the key concept to take forward from this going as we go, and I'll talk about it a couple more times, is the idea of time to proficiency. And so we're a very experience-driven industry. A new graduate, depending on their discipline, needs several years to get up to speed. So if you're looking at, say, ramp-ups of production and ramp-ups of activity in places like this, these are the engineers who are driving that. And as we drop off here, and if we continue to drop off, when we start to recover in an experienced way at the right time. So the rebound, I think, is going to be a little bit different. We talked about price of rebound and so on and what that looks like, but the nature of the business model, I think, is going to be slightly different too. This one I just pulled real quickly from OPEC, and it's world supply and world demand, if I could get that last line to show up. And you see that, according to OPEC, they see demand sort of catching up with supply in the third quarter of 2017, but really beginning about now, that gap is closing. And that, I think, is congruent with what most people think. But what that means is that with the concept of time to proficiency and development times for people, we've got to be ahead of that curve, because when the opportunities start to arise to produce and to ramp up your business, you need to make sure that the people are there. And even as individuals, you need to make sure that you're prepared to do that. The operating environment, I think, is going to be very volatile and very unstable for the next few years. We are going to still have, I think, either a supply overhang or the possibility that it can occur as the price goes up. So that's a force that drives down. Pressure on climate is going to drive the market downward. Continuing improvement in shale efficiency, that can do either one of two things. It can either help us to get back on track, or if we overproduce again, then it pushes the market downward again. Demand in the developing world pushes it up. Potential for significant disruptions tend to push it up. And we see those all the time. We just don't know what they're going to be. Currency issues can go back and forth. And then you have the whole entire issue of black swans. And with black swans, we can be looking at technical things, some of which push the market up, some of which push the market down. We can see improvement in recovery factors with shale, which make everybody happy. We can see improvement in carbon management technology, which takes off some of the pressure from climate. You could also see major breakthroughs in batteries, which push the market for us downward in oil and gas, because now solar and wind become much more viable because you can store that energy better. Somebody could get cold fusion, you don't know. The point is that going forward, we're looking at an environment of uncertainty for the foreseeable future. So what does that have to do with business models and talent then? So it means what our organizations have to do is we have to be more flexible, and our talent has to be more flexible going forward. Three aspects of new business models that I think make the future look different from the past as we come out of this recovery, or come into the recovery. First of all, you see trends of what I call consolidation around the core. You see companies swapping assets because they're consolidating their footprint, and my asset in one place doesn't fit as well as it would with you, so we swap. Also, functional specializations are starting to occur, and I got a little thing here, where companies are integrating around certain aspects of function. And I think we're seeing this more with the smaller and mid-sized companies than with the big ones, but it drives business models toward more specialization, and that's going to have influences on your talent models as well. The next one is, if you haven't heard the buzzword, which I just heard as a buzzword not very long ago, manufacturing. But it goes back to what Katie and RT were talking about improvements in technology and repeatability. And so there's talent implications here as well. And to me, this one is really, really interesting because if we're in a world where our production upstream begins to value repeatable process as opposed to engineering creativity, that speaks to a different sort of talent mindset that might be more successful and might be more reflective of what we see in the downstream parts of the industry, like refining, where repeatable process is your key to success, as opposed to creativity. So it's an interesting cultural dynamic and something that I'm paying attention to right now, and I think we need to look at going forward is, do we need a different sort of person upstream than what we've had before because of this repeatable process nature of fracking? And then the last big one, and there are lots of different factors that influence business models going forward. There's economics, there's finance, there's cost management, all kinds of things, but I think those are more continuous with what we've seen in the past. But the one that I think we haven't seen as much of, and I'm in Colorado, we see this right now because we've got 4 ballot initiatives that are aiming to either limit or shut down oil and gas operations. That'll be coming up for petitioning right now and could be on our ballot in the fall. But political risk on a local basis is something that is really becoming prominent, and even on a global basis because of climate. So I think that looks at our talent as well in 2 ways. One is we have to have more people who directly deal with these issues, and 2 is what we have to be able to sensitize our operating leadership to be able to position ourselves to minimize the impact of these things. Real quick look at workforce mathematics, and here we'll get back to the time to proficiency issue. Price, production, productivity, these things drive the talent that we need. And it's really a function of operational needs. And you can build all this stuff off of ratios. You just put this together. Then we subtract from that the talent we already have, and we know what that is. Then you got talent losses. So how do you lose people? Retirements, resignations, terminations, layoffs, reorgs, all the ways that we can lose people. Then you pull it all together, and that's the people you need to recruit, right? Where do you get them? You promote, you transfer new hires. But you got this whole time to proficiency issue again. So what you have to do is you have to understand how long it takes somebody to become proficient at whatever they need to do and have them on hand with that amount of lead time before you need them in their role. This is growth, jobs due to growth. This is a BLS number. And what we're seeing here from 2014 to 2024, it doesn't look like very much. 22,000 people in these different jobs need to be added to the workforce according to BLS projections. BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that seems pretty manageable. But here is a different picture, talent replacement. So this is just a few different job titles in the industry, but they're key ones for operations. And what we're seeing here is instead of magnitudes of 2,000 and 3,000 per job title, we're seeing 10, 20, 30,000 people who are projected to be needed to be replaced. These are people who are eligible to retire right now. And so it's that replacement picture that's the real kicker. So back to the issues of the workforce. People have been hurt. The people who are still here, they're overworked. You all know this. You all see this every day. There's a lot of trust issues. There's a lot of need to rebuild the engagement of the workforce as we go forward to be able to position ourselves to take advantage of the recovery. One of the ways to do this is by development because it is cheaper than a lot of hiring and so on, and also it allows you to make the changes that you need to make culturally too, and so it's time to start investing in development if you can. This is a concept that I work with, and I'm going to go through this real fast. Talent risk. I just want to leave you with the idea that any strategy, any business activity has risk associated with it. This is something that interests our boards and so on. Talent is a risk like anything else. So are people available? Are they aligned? Are they capable, engaged? What's your turnover and what's your leadership? These are all things that can cause your strategies to fail if you don't pay attention to them. And I was talking before this presentation this morning about this with someone, and the fact that these issues don't really get to the attention necessarily of the CEO or the board, or they don't make that top 3 or 4 list, and this is a way of making that happen. So as you develop a talent strategy going forward, here's what we got to think about. What's your scenario for the rebound? What's your business model? What's the core of your business? Because you build your talent from the core of your business outward. If you're a production-oriented company, then the production is the core. It's where you make your money, and then you build everything from that. What's your go signal? When do you know that you have to start preparing, and how do you factor in your time to proficiency issues into that? What's your development infrastructure for people? And then building for the future, not the past. And here I think the real issue is flexibility, because the response to uncertainty and volatility is to be flexible and agile, both as an organization, as an individual. So you see things that Katie talked about, roles versus jobs. Organizing your workforce around roles so that you can be flexible and change with different dynamics and different things that happen as time goes on. As an individual, building your skills to be flexible. Talent profiles, the things that are going to affect this, changes to the business model, which we talked about. Looking forward at technology, different jobs are more vulnerable than other jobs and more easily replaced by growing technology, operating efficiencies, and so on. So we're likely to see relatively less, and I don't mean necessarily absolutely less, but relative to other jobs, of exploration, labor, support and service analysts going forward, relatively more on the production side, maintenance trades growing, legal and stakeholder growing, although those numbers are very small and they won't be big numbers, but proportionally they grow a lot. EHS, same thing, relatively smaller, but growing a lot proportionally over the next 3 or 4 years. So that's where the talent demand is likely to be. IT is another one. So last slide for me is, as an individual, what do you do? And you know, what we tell our students right now in a downturn is that, and keep in mind, you know, we're pan-energy and our students are older, average age of 34. If you look at any sector of the industry, whether it's oil and gas, wind, solar, whatever it is, they're all going to experience significant turbulence over the next 20 to 30 years. But if you look at energy as a whole, it's a steady upward trend. You might get a dip here and there because the global economy takes a step backwards, but you know, it looks like this as it goes forward. So what we try to tell our students who are becoming leaders, managers, commercial people, as opposed to engineering specialists or something like that, position yourself as an energy professional who can go into different aspects of the industry and work that way. Understand and align to strategy. So as an individual, as you plan your career and plan your next steps of your career, it's very important to know where your company's going. And what you have to do is you have to find that sweet spot where your career goals intersect with the company's needs and plan accordingly. And then manage your company's development processes. Understand how that organization develops people, how they make decisions, who makes those decisions, and then get to know those people and interact with them, because their interest is to advance your career just as much as your interest is to advance your career. And if you can come to them in a structured way and talk about, this is where I want to go, this is where I think the company needs me, how do we make these steps, how do we do that, then that is the way to move that forward, and it gets you, onto that hypo list. So for me, and I guess we'll do questions later on. Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Good job, Jim. I was thinking, when you talked about turbulence, no matter what sector you're in, yesterday I attended a conference of investors in a commercial real estate company, and the conference was the Disruption Conference. And all it was showing these people what's getting ready to happen. And it was in all categories. I mean, it was in medical, in depth, in oil and gas, in robotics. And the prediction is that we're headed for major disruption in all categories. I just thought that might make you feel better about not being alone in this category. Okay, so up next with GE Oil and Gas, let's hear it from Maria Borges.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Today, I'm going to talk about how big data is transforming the workforce. So GE is 124 years old company. It's an industrial company with core businesses from aviation, transportation, healthcare to the energy sector. We have two main strategic imperatives in the company. One is to be the digital industrial company, and the other one is to build the financial model for all the vertical businesses. When we talk about digital company, we are not just talking about just technology. It's talking about businesses, strategy, and also how do we think in a different way, but also how do we reinvent our core businesses. So today, all of us are exposed to data. We have the opportunity to have iPhones, Google, everything. And everything is changing now, the way that we have to approach our businesses. So our customers are changing. Before, we influencing them. Now, they are self-learning. They go to internet, they check everything, and they basically make their own choices. The competitors are changing as well, because you don't compete just with your competitors in your own industry. We are competing with companies that are coming from other sectors. So that changed big time the way we innovate is changing. Before, we spent time in perfection, having the right product, testing for 3 or 4 years until we are completely sure that the equipment can run. Now, it's how do we test quickly, how do we fail, and how do we correct? So innovation is a completely different approach today in the company as well. But also, the value proposition that we have for the businesses is different, because it's changing every day, depending on the competition, depending how the customers are changing, and we have to adapt our value proposition according to the world that we are today. So in terms of the workforce and skills that we have, we define that in 4 main pockets. The first one is we cannot forget the industrial expertise. So we continue developing people in the vertical expertise. So in the oil and gas, in healthcare, in power, and that expertise is critical for our customers. But also, we need to start to think in other kind of skills that are going to impact the world. That is the digital capability. So how do we analyze data? We made decisions before very intuitive, with gut feelings. Now needs to be data-driven, and how we take the data to really developing outcomes. And then how do we think horizontally? It's not just about thinking in your industry. How do you take advantage of other industries, and how do you put solutions in front of the customer that can leverage in all the businesses? And then how do you learn? Today, just going to a classroom and learning is not anymore an option. It's expensive. And also with the different generations that we have, you have to adapt to them. So we have to be thinking about training one-to-one, training people 24/7, having access to them, online tools that we have to have. And then the cultural change, that probably is the biggest challenge that all of us face in the digital world. And I would like to give you an example that we are living in the company, how we are experiencing this cultural change. So in my commercial role, I have to develop what is the behaviors that we want to have in the sales force, how we need to work in a global world where we have to go to solutions, but also how do we communicate between the regions, between product companies, between people that are working in over the place, and how do we train them fast. So we developed the CRM system that we call in NG the deal machine. And as you can imagine, a CRM system, it's a tool that every company uses. And for us, the way that we were using that tool was as a repository tool. just to have the information there, to have contact information from the customers, and it was more as a track record. So we have to think, how do we are going to use the data that the system is going to give us? How do we want to measure different things that we didn't think before, like, for example, productivity for the sales teams? How do we know who is doing what? How do we know that we are responding to the customer on time? So all the behaviors and the accountability that we want to have in our teams, how do we want to have ownership on the data? So we have to rethink how the approach in terms of behaviors and how do we want to do, what we want to do with the data. And at the end is which kind of platform we are using and we want to get from the platform. So the platform is a CRM system itself, but then is how do we go and connect everybody with the transparency of the information that they can see what is going on in the different regions, what is going on in the product companies, and how do we design that tool for people that is so far from probably places that the customer is. And also, how do we retrain them to use? Today, in this world, it's expensive to train people, so how do we do something like the iPad, the self-training? And today, we have accomplished the implementation of the system where basically people are looking at the data, they are making decisions faster, they are talking between the different product companies, and also they are self-trainings. And a clear example is probably the forecasting that you have to do for every quarter. And before, we were very reactive in say, okay, we lost the quarter, we don't have a lot of pipeline. Now, what we are doing is what we have to do now to change the results. How do we see the pipeline health, and how do we start to see the productivity of our sales teams? And the tool is a tool like an iPad. It's basically you have all the information, you are self-learning, you get information on time, real time, and you can use it immediately. And then at the end, we are focusing on three things. Is how do we transform data to make decisions and to give insights to the people? Sharing intelligence is how do we share information, collaborate. Instead of working on silos, how do we work peer-to-peer? And then is how do we drive productivity and how do we optimize all our processes and equipment? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. That was cool. When you were talking about, test, fail, and correct fast, I'm just always blown away by Elon Musk and the way SpaceX does that compared to the way we used to. It's we live in an extraordinarily fast-paced time, that's for sure. Okay, so our fourth and last speaker, who was sitting right to my right, when we were talking about downturns a while ago, people raising their hand, he said, wow, I had one last night. So without further ado, David Reed with NOV.
Good morning. Oh, some of you are still awake. That's good. All right, some ground rules, some tools, communication tools I'm going to give to you. If I get boring, if you could just cough the word boring. Could someone do that for me? Thank you. Right. See, that's how that works. If it's getting late and I'm running time, can I have a time? Yeah, that's good. Anything else? Offensive? Anyone? Okay, good. Cough offensive. So those are about the words I'm looking for, so I'll be listening. So yeah, this is a great subject. Workforce changes. For me, it's very interesting how we talk about this. So we talk about millennials. Do we have millennials in the room? Any hands for millennials? Some shy millennials. Do we have Gen X? That's me. Any of you guys? And then, what are the other ones called? Baby boomers, those guys. Yeah, do we have them? Yeah, a lot of them. Okay, great. So those are called barriers between people. They're very popular, but we try to hide them culturally when they're about where you're from or, other things, So eventually we'll grow out of this ridiculous behavior and realize that who here is a human? Well, we only have a few. Okay, so the rest of you can go because I know this will be boring for you. But the 5 of us here, I'm going to be talking to you. Okay, so things change. For me, I came into the industry in Scotland. About 12, 13, I went to my first punk concert that changed my life, a band called Stiff Little Fingers. You all know them, right? Do I have any? Yeah, their backup band was these 17 pimply guys called U2. They turned out to be bigger, both Irish bands. But it was a time where, you know, I grew up in an oil town. We didn't like the Americans who came, sorry. Weren't too excited about you guys. We liked the money. Things were getting better. That was going well. But I was a kid, you know, so growing up in the 80s, people getting laid off, you could tell oil was bad just from that. But generally, in the base of the culture, we were happy because there was work. Turns out people like that. So even when things were hard, there was work. And I think as I came into the industry, you might think now people are coming in the industry, some are leaving. So as I came in, I started off as an architect. And so obviously that leads right into oil and gas, doesn't it? Yeah, so what happened was I got fired, and I'd been in California doing architecture, came back to Scotland, my first job. I did a drawing for a nightclub, but it was originally a church conversion, so going to hell, exactly. Did you just say that? So yeah, so I got fired, and I got into oil and gas doing QA because they said that was really easy, which it was actually. So I did that for about a year, and then someone found me. Someone socially asked me what I did, and I said, well, paperwork, you know. And so he hired me. This guy just liked me. And he hired me, and I thought, well, you know, I had probably a 1-year-old at the time. And I thought, yeah, I need the money, so that's good. And so I stayed for a bit, and it was about an hour drive, which here is normal, but in Scotland, that's a weekend trip. So I was doing that every day for about 2 years. And I definitely wanted out. But a guy came and spoke who was our chairman at the time. Actually, he walked past my office, and he said hello and moved on. He looked like Colonel Sanders, but anyway, that was just something it was interesting. But I remembered his face. There was something charismatic about him. He talked in the workshop with everyone there, and it was a downturn, and he talked about caring about people, and I was like, what? And in Scotland, you know, we're not the most sensitive bunch. But it was interesting to me. So 2 things. This guy changed my view. The way he thought about the industry, what they wanted people to be, how they wanted people to be was kind of inspiring. And then when I interviewed, everyone I interviewed at the time had these things that we'd never seen before. So this is a generational, you might not get it. But they had like little boxes with tiny televisions on them that looked like paper. I mean, like printed paper. It was amazing. And so I asked the guy, what is that? And he goes, well, it's a Mac. It's a computer, and you get one. I was like, I want it in. Oh, also, we give you funds so you can have a computer at home and a bicycle. This is Scotland, right? So no one gives you anything free in Scotland. Once you come to America as a Scottish guy, go to a buffet, you don't ever want to leave. That doesn't happen in Scotland. So this idea, what happened was I was compelled into a company that I didn't even care about oil and gas. I cared about what's in this for me. And they started working with me and growing me. And I think we get a bit obsessed on this whole idea of, whoa, no, we're in a downturn. So who knows what follows a downturn? Oh, gosh, you guys are good. I don't even know why you came. Who knows what follows an upturn? There you go. See, you're genius. You could do marketing now. And strategy, by the way. Just saved you a bunch of money. Sorry, half of the room. So that's what you do. This is the whole game in our business. The whole game is that you've got to understand where you are and what comes next. Our work right now is to get ready for what comes next. What does success look like? When you come through this thing, you realize, I've got some beautiful slides. I'm not going to use them. So sorry. I just realized I'm not going to use them. But when you realize as you go through life and as you go through working that people is the key, right? It's people, yourself, and the people you influence becomes how things work. And if you're going to do things well, you better learn how they work. So, we kind of get caught in corporate culture where we think that there's something warm and lovely about corporations, and there's not. So you can write that one down. They're full of human beings, and it's the humans that make it work. And if you don't work out how humans work, you're going to struggle. And I think that's where we get obsessed with trying to work out how you deal with humans as a mass, and this is where the idea of corporations come. But fundamentally, it's not very helpful to think of people in corporate terms because there are no corporate babies that I've seen yet. Maybe there are, but it's not a human style. And so if you're going to learn how to work with humans, how to inspire humans and do great things, you're going to have to learn human things. So here's a human thing. It's kind of messy, but in life, downturns happen, right? Sometimes when the business is an upturn, a downturn happens. Bad things happen. So what is that? Is that something that you just say, oh, well, let's study, what's happening to everyone and how we're going to recover? Or do you know that bad things happen and you learn how to deal with human beings when bad things happen? This is the era that we're in, teaching people what it means. So if 50% of our workforce is put outside and said, sorry, first of all, it should feel bad for us to do that. Because we weren't just hiring people who weren't good. We had people we thought were very good. We're just trying to make a business survive. And so then you have to think about, so how are we going to do that? As we come in, if you're starting to plan now for your downturn, you got that, it's too late. But you can try and adapt and learn as you go. But when you go into this, what it should sound like for healthiness in a business, and I'm hearing this more this time around. I used to see, I went from Scotland to California, and the Varco organization was based there, so they were very touchy-feely. They thought about a lot of things no one in the oil field was thinking about back then. But I did see something, and it's still to this day, I'll go back there, and people I've laid off twice are still there. That's what it looks like. So I just yesterday was talking to someone who's in the room, and so she was saying, I've got another job, I'm going to go to it, but I'll be back. That's success. I've got some really bad news. So, okay, this might be good news. I don't know. You might be too late. So I'm going to, also you'll need pen and paper for this one. There is only one problem in your life. It's good, right? Short list. The one problem is you. Yeah, it's kind of awkward, isn't it? Not as funny. But I just saved you maybe a divorce, maybe, if the whole idea that everyone else is the problem, you actually don't control everyone else. You should write that down too. You want to go through a lot of marriage counseling, you'll learn that that's basically, you can't make people happy. You can't make people do things. But yourself, yes, you can. You can work on this. And this is where all the work is. The problem of how do I learn? So when you say people are leaving and they're not coming back, stupid people, stupid industry, millennials, that's it. It's you. It's you. People don't come back to you and it becomes a theme. It's you. So what are you going to do with this downturn? What are you going to do next? Spend your downturn planning. If you're not working anymore next week, you just got a message that when it came down to it, at the core of the company, you weren't the most valuable to the process. So that could be really hard. But for me, designing a nightclub in a church, I came out and went, maybe I'm going the wrong way. And we were homeless twice at that time with a 6-month-old. We ended up living in government housing. So my wife is Californian. No Californian should ever be subject to Scottish people in government housing. Because the Americans have like a place which is extremely beautiful out in the country. They don't deal with the dirty people. So when you're put in with them, it was pretty unpleasant. But it was a form of downturn. So what it did for me was put me in a place where I was really keen to have a wage. And I could not change the oil in my car at the time. Didn't know how. I know that because my first day to the job, I had a problem with oil and went to the guy who hired me halfway to work. So he learned that I also didn't know. And I was put into a repair workshop. So, you know, an architect should be in a repair workshop. I talk in a way, so in Scotland they know by the way you talk which part of town you're from, which city you're from, so I'm in the wrong town. And I talk like someone who grew up in a nice part of town, so that went well too. It was difficult, but what happened was the people who were around me saw things in me and they made it flourish. They started giving me opportunity. An opportunity for anybody that you deal with, so another control issue. If you give people opportunity, they will make mistakes. I know that's shocking, but they're going to not do it as well as you want it to be done. And this is really our challenge. It's the same as they might want to do things with technology that you wouldn't think is a good idea. You probably want to let them do that. When I turned up, and I loved the fact we had computers, and from that day I was IT, and I was PowerPoint guy for many years, until I told my boss I was changing my card to VP of PPT. And he's like, what does that mean? I said, can I just have someone to make PowerPoints? I think it's a lot of money to be spending on a PowerPoint maker. But it was, you know, from slides to PowerPoint, I was that guy who said, you probably want to have the overhead still there because the computer isn't as, you know, great as you think it's going to be, and the projector might not work. So I was that guy, and I was the software guy when we put animations first on shows, and I did all those things, but it was never what I was. But people let me do it. And people let me do a lot of things. And this is how you get talent. You make it exciting, and you think about the future. And you can't control the future, and you can't know what it is. Some of you, I know you can, and we can buy it, but you can't. And you can't control people. And those are really important things for how do I adapt, where are we going as an industry. All you can do is make it awesome to work for you. All you can do is say, I'm going to plan on a future that I don't know, but I'm guessing there'll be some technology there that I don't know now. And so there's my challenge. So even if it's just, if oil and gas stopped in 10 years, everyone's going to have a job doing something. So develop. It's not that oil and gas is stopping. It's not a big issue. The issue is make work great for people, do great things, get very excited about what's possible in the future, and become a person who makes a difference. And this industry, when we go through downturns, we get the coolest people because the people who stay have personal vision. They have a desire to do great things, and they've learned through really hard times, wild mood swings of our industry, that you learn to hold on and to think of how can I create more value. It's really exciting. I mean, I came in and we had giant, at that time, 100-foot tall robots. That's all I wanted to do. You know, we made 2 of them, but I was pretty excited about it. And in time, we made hundreds of them. And I got to be a part of that because I was the guy who wanted to do robots. Most other people were terrified of this idea. And all the guys who did robots now run our company. It's kind of cool. But you have to remember that you lead positively. That in life, negative things happen. And so I'll close with an architectural thought. When you design buildings, they create two types of space. We all talk space. You don't want to talk to architects. But there's enclosed spaces like this, and people will stay and habitate in there. And then if you create large open spaces, people move through it. And so the principle that they teach is that we move through negative space, which is what we call that, and we live in positive space. And that's important. So positivity in itself is useless for humans because things don't work out positively all the time. But teaching people to deal with negative and move through it, don't live in the negative, but move through it and use it as a growth engine for your next cycle to continuously live in a positive place. And that's how you should think about the future, because although we can't control the future, it hasn't happened yet. So we can plan on a better future. And that's how it works. So, thank you.
Man, that was something. Didn't know we were going to get like a psychological lesson in here. How many of you think David really has some other PowerPoint charts? I don't think he does. Not necessary. Okay, so it's Q&A time. So if you have some questions written down, please kind of identify yourself. Hold them up for somebody to come around and pick up. And we will move ahead. So I've got one right up front, and this is actually sort of for anybody and everybody in the panel. But when you look at the future and you look at change, and we talked about a lot, Maria was the only one that mentioned big data. And everywhere I go in events, I was at the D5 event, I was at the Darcy Forum, these were events that surrounded completely the future of oil and gas is driving down cost. And the consensus is there's probably no bigger category than information technology, partly because of all the sensing devices that were used in shale production, but they weren't really used, they just sensed, and then we sold $100 a barrel oil, it didn't matter. But there's a feeling amongst some, and I've interviewed this guy, Mark Mills, that wrote Shale 2.0. He says we're going to be able, the leaders in the industry are going to really be able to drive the cost of production down through IT. Does anybody dispute that? Does anybody agree with it or have a comment on it? RT's turning on his mic, and so is David.
I'm in. So we looked at this around 2000. If anyone went through Y2K, you would start looking at it and thinking, maybe this is a deal. But we found that companies outside of our industry were doing some interesting things with the internet and with uptime and the models of business. And so we started investing back then. I think investing now is, you've got a long journey, but we've been doing a lot of really good big data stuff where the ability to take all the data we have gathered over those years and convert that into knowledge is going to be huge from a performance side. We think everything will change. It's back to, we have the CEO of EOG on our board, and he said, hey, check out these apps. And he had all these apps showing his production and things that were going on. I said, so do you have an app developer? And he said, no, it's just our guys do this. Some of it's valuable, some of it's not. And I think that's a change that we just need to, it's back to letting people go wild with it and enjoy it and, create the systems. Most of it exists and it's off the shelf, and that's something people think we have to create a lot of stuff. A lot of work's been done and we can just pull it into the industry, and I think it'll make a big change.
Okay, RT, did you have a comment on that too?
Yeah, essentially that's our business. I mean, we take data points from across the globe and add an industry perspective to that, increase the quality and provide insight to our clients. I mean, at the end of the day, our job is to help make people more knowledgeable, and then hopefully they apply that, and then applying knowledge is wisdom, and they make wise decisions, they make good decisions, they make profitable decisions.
Okay, well, I also was in a discussion with Alan Gilmer just this last week. He was on last quarter's Energy Breakfast panel, the founder of Drilling Info, and he was talking about this, not so much from the digital perspective, but from the variance in cost of production that's taking place right now. And he sort of attributes it almost more to talent in the field. I mean, I'm sure there's some luck involved too, but I mean, the range was unbelievable. And did we have that sort of range in the conventional days at all? Does anybody know?
No, and there's an interesting terminology actually about referring to the millennials being digital natives as opposed to digital immigrants, which the rest of us are. And, to go back to some of the things that David was saying, what you need to do is just kind of unleash that and let them go, because they'll find things that we haven't even thought of.
Do you guys, Jim, teach any, kind of emphasis on IT, big data in your programs?
Not from a technical point of view, because we're a management program. But we do cover a lot of that, from a management point of view about how do you manage these functions, how do you manage the people in these functions, and try to get the work out of it there.
Okay, absolutely.
One thing, we developed a wired pipe and managed to stream data to the surface, at which point most of the industry, it was 10 years ago when we first did it, most said, we have way too much data, why are you giving us more? And it's only now that they're realizing, computers. people aren't actually going to be looking through all this data. So yeah, it's changed a lot.
Okay. Maria, you mentioned a lot about digital skills. Do you guys retrain existing employees, or is it such with the millennials and so forth that they come and show up with the skills, so you're not going to retrain those that don't have them?
No, actually, it is a mix that we have to retrain all our sales force, but also it's new capabilities and new skills that we need, like data science. You know, so people that are developing codes, that are developing algorithms in order to have more predictive analytics. So we think that the issue is not the data, because everybody has data. It's what do you do with the data? How do you translate that in an outcome to really have a value proposition for that is productivity, and how do we start to have also less KPIs where you can start to see progress. So it's more about the skills in analyzing data, what does mean that data, versus and combining with the science. So now it's more, you cannot separate between an engineer and a manager. It's how do you put that two skills at the same level and integrate that profiles.
Interesting. How long have you been now? You've only been with GE for how long?
1 year and a half.
Okay. I mean, it is such a progressive company. I mean, the way that you even presented it too, I've heard your CEO speak several times. Was that an adjustment for you too in joining GE, or did you live and work in that much of a progressive environment before GE?
No, it was, actually I was 20 years in the oil and gas industry. Right. And it was quite refreshing for me to go to a company like GE, where the way that we see talent in the oil and gas industry is you hire people in the university, you put it in training in the field, and then you spend 3 years and you have your managers in that way. In GE, it's more horizontal knowledge, which is fascinating. How do you take knowledge from aviation or transportation or power, and how do you use all these kind of skills in the other industry? And it is about technologies, it is about the skills as well, but also the world is completely different, you know. Okay. So it was exciting and refreshing for me to see that.
Of course, but you're from Colombia, right?
I am from.
Yeah, you would have probably felt very differently if you were from Scotland, right?
I think so.
Okay, here's a cool one. As a chemical engineering student, how can I best prepare myself for the changes and challenges the industry will face in the future? Go to Colorado University.
Well, that's the obvious answer. Yeah, it really goes without saying in that dimension. Don't take your engineering skills for granted, or the importance of the engineering for granted, because that's really the core of what you do, and it's going to be the core of your function for the next few years. But having said that, I think that the hardest thing for somebody coming out of technical roles, especially engineering, is to understand the business aspects of the business and the people aspects of the business. And you'll reach a point in your career where if you can't master those things, you will plateau. And maybe you get a really cool technical job as a process engineer somewhere, and you're inventing new processes. And if that's the direction that you want to go, then that's great. But if you want to advance into leadership or anything from your company, then you've got to be able to master those business and people aspects of the industry. And so as you progress in your career and get more comfortable with your technical acumen and your technical skills, make sure that you're developing your people and business skills as well.
Okay. Does anybody on the panel have a question for another panel member? Or an audience member? You can ask them a question. Okay. So are we ready to do the major drawing? Let's let Maria do the drawing. So the way this works, once again, you have to be here, but I haven't seen anybody leave, so I would think you're still here. And the winner is? Scottish accent.
I've got to put one on. No one thinks I have a Scottish accent in Scotland. Okay, V2Com, Gabriel Roisenberg.
Gabriel, here he
There
is.
you go. And you can
All
take
right.
the panel with you to dinner? No. Okay,
Right.
Sorry.
All right, let's hear it for our panel one more time. And also for our sponsors who did a great job of really keeping this one flowing. And for Kevin, David, and Diana. Let's hear it for them. Thank you all, and drive carefully. You bet.